Welcome everyone to Skills Masterclass. This is where we basically unbundle work and we talk more about, what is the work? We unbundle one industry at a time. Today's session is all about the education industry. Now, the education industry, as you all would know, is one of the most critical sectors globally. It powers pretty much all of from when you first start school to when you retire, it comes through pretty much every single part of the life cycle when you think about work. And not only are we going to focus on the angle of, well, what does it mean for the teachers and the educators and the business of education, but we're also going to sort of touch a little bit about on, the actual broader look of that, of how folks will be educated, what do we believe will be the future of that space, how AI will play into that, whether it's to inform and help educate or whether that is to impact and drive a completely different world. So this is a really exciting one. And I think this one's a pretty loose one in terms of, the data around not only the work, but also these predictions. So we'd love folks, what do you think is going to happen? Drop in the chat, let us know. I'm joined here. I'm Siobhan Savage. I'm the CEO and I'm one of the founders at Reejig. My background is workforce strategy. And I'm joined by Mike Reed, who's our chief product officer, and he's sort of the in-house expert on all things of the work ontology. And we're here to simplify really the complexities of each industry and what's happening. No one really knows what's happening in the world right now when it comes to AI. So we're trying to use our data to paint a picture for you all about what that means for you, what that means for your workforce, and more broadly as an industry. So super excited. Let's dive in, Mike, and get started. So on the agenda today, what we're going to focus on is give you a bit of a kind of what's happening in the industry. What are we seeing? What does the earnings call say? What's the public market saying? Then we're going to break down the work ontology, what it is and why it matters. We'll then focus on the impact of AI and what the assessment is when we looked at the data. We'll then take that insight and then inform our reskilling strategies. And then finally, what we want to be able to do is package up enough intelligence and insights and new ways of thinking for you to take that back to your business or to your school or to your classroom and really focus on how you can use AI and how you can take action in your world today. So thank you, Mike, for joining us. This is going to be a good one.
All good. This is an exciting one.
So from an education perspective, obviously this plays a pivotal role in enabling not only growth, education, innovation. It's basically the kind of building blocks for work itself. Now, the global education industry was valued at about 6 trillion in the most recent years, but it's projected to reach 10 trillion by 2030. Now, that is a crazy amount of growth in a space. Now, this is being driven by the adoption of digital learning, the expansion of edtech solutions, and increasing demand for lifelong education. There has never been a more important time for learning, for education, because of the impacts of AI. There has never been a more important time for anyone who is teaching our children, from designing the curriculum to driving what education looks within the workforce, to individuals advocating for themselves and learning. This is huge. This is a powerful moment of disruption that's happening in this space. And, we're really excited to really dig into this one today to see. And, when we looked and we focused on the US sector because the US has the biggest level of data when it comes to the industries. And what we could see was, the government is really focusing policies in underserved regions, especially around technology and innovations that are set to drive value for the sector as well. And the industry as a whole is projected to grow at an annual rate of 4.5, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. Mike, what was the kind of, when you were learning about the data and dipping in from the outlook perspective, what were the kind of key themes that you started to see in the data?
One of the headlines I think you've called out is that this is the moment when we've completed a transition from the traditional approach, where learning is something that you do to prepare for a career. So whether it's just school learning into a trade, or whether it's tertiary education, qualifications research to pursue a higher qualified course. The traditional approach, it feels like this is the moment where it's changed to, as you said, now the expectation is lifelong learning. It's not something that's done and now I start my career. It's now integral to somebody's career. And it's integral because these careers are changing. trying to unpick the drivers behind this was really interesting, because I think the thing that focused my attention when we were analysing this was that it's not just the education workforce. It's not just the educators and the support staff around that. It is the learners as well. The curriculum, what are they learning? How do we enable our learners to deliver a successful society going forward? So it's about their work, but it's also about the work that's going to be valuable in the future.
Yeah.
And underneath that, so that's the supply and demand, educators and learners. The other thing that was really interesting as we're transitioning into a world where AI is our digital partner in a lot of instances, is understanding what that means. And understanding what that means historically has been the role of academics to unpick how are these models performing? What is the implications, whether it's societal implications, economic implications, ethical implications? How do we move from the model that we've got to the model that we need? So the amount of research to understand what's happening at this lightning pace in the commercial landscape has traditionally been academics, and they're fighting for funding and compute time in the same cloud that everybody else is rapidly building these things underneath their feet. So the struggle to adequately fund and understand and research what the impact is going to be, how we're going to set up an educational workforce that understands what we need to deliver and is set up to use technology to deliver, and then what's the impact on the learners. This was a whole of society piece when I was looking at the research.
When we were sketching this up, like I kind of like mind map things in my brain a little bit. And if I was to summarize the problems that I see, or whether you want to look at the shadow or the golden side, the problems or the opportunities that I see when we look at the whole education sector. So one, if you focus on the teacher and your children in the classroom, what is the sort of way that children will interact with AI? And also, what are we telling kids should be their future? And what are the paths that we're going to drive kids towards? Because no one knows. Like even the AI companies are still trying to figure that out. So imagine a teacher trying to figure that stuff out. So I see that as one big problem. The other problem I see is then when you look at the education space as a business, massive shortages around, qualified teachers, and, how do they then interact with AI to create that kind of co-pilot experience for them to kind of do more of the meaningful work. But also there is like really big shortages of teachers and qualified, experts, because a lot of the machine learning and AI academics are now being taken by the AI companies themselves. And, there's a massive disparity between the salary of an education worker in a university versus what they would get paid at Facebook, right? So that's like pardon?
And a researcher as well.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'm clustering right now in terms of just the bigger theme of the problem. But yes, I then see another big problem where you're looking at the education providers themselves. So like universities are going to have to think more broadly about how they're thinking about like micro learning, because no one can afford or wants to do, a couple of years degree or master's or MBA. What difference will that make? Like you got to really, if you're going to ask for that money, you're going to have to seriously be able to project that me spending 100K will actually be worth it in my career whenever I can work alongside a digital twin and actually drive, and learn on demand and kind of just on time learning. So there's going to be this whole thing around reinvention of actual learning. And does a degree matter? Does it? Like, you know what I mean? Like in this world. So that's kind of another thing where I think there's going to be, a really big shift around how we democratize learning in a completely different way. And then I think from the individual, if you look at the normal worker every day, they are completely saturated by all of the different tools and experiences and overwhelmed with what to do. How do they know what to do? Like, how are they supposed to know what learning they're going to do and what pathway to drive towards whenever like the AI companies and the smartest people on the planet don't know? But yet we're expecting them to log into a library with millions of different courses on offer and expect them to be able to navigate. Like that's another thing I see. And then the final kind of summary closer of like the big problems that I see is the learning tech, in my opinion, is going to be obsolete pretty soon. The way that the vendors have built learning experiences is not for a critical event. It's not based on like actually anticipation of what the actual end user requires, the path, where to take them. And I actually think that AI will end up being like your co-pilot live, helping you learn in demand, like in sort of classroom form. You know, help me build a website. You'll have a GPT sitting beside you telling you, might click here, do that. And it'll be more of this on-demand, real-time learning simulations than it will be like that traditional kind of learning courses. Anyway, that's kind of what I have been seeing when I looked at all your research that you presented.
Yeah, and I think the other things we didn't get a chance to touch on here were things like AR and VR. Like, as you said, how is learning delivered in the moment when we couldn't have taught it a year ago because the solution didn't exist, the product didn't exist, the process didn't exist. My dad was in accounts balancing books the same way when he retired as he was when he started his career.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist anymore. So this kind of packaged episode of learning in your life is redundant in today's career, in today's society. So this is a everybody question.
Yeah, completely agree. And to validate a little bit of that, one of the things we love to do is we analyze all of the earnings calls, whether it's sort of your top universities, the publicly available calls, or whether it's, you know, the providers of the learning itself. We want to understand what does that look like in terms of that ability for us to understand. And as you can see on this little kind of word cloud, we can see that sort of staff shortages and upskilling are some of the biggest things that are being mentioned by leaders. So we're looking at, you know, the president of Stanford. We've looked at Newton, we've looked at Harvard, and this is information about sort of what these folks are really thinking about in terms of the future. AI and personalized learning, funding constraint, as you were mentioning, lifelong learning. These were some of the key things. And it's really interesting that Stanford was also saying that sort of they have to prepare students for the future, and they have to look at a more flexible and continuous learning. If the universities get that right, they actually would make way more money if they were not just like doing it at one part of their career and then they go off to work. Like the university should be thinking a bit bigger in terms of how do we kind of tap in and be the lifelong learning partner of folks whenever they enter into the workforce. So right from hire to retire, they're kind of like pre-hire to retire when you think about the access points that they have if they were to get this right.
Yeah, I think, and there's three really good aspects here. There's the future is personalized learning. So how do I take an individual and their background and make them more suitable for tomorrow? Stanford makes a really good point that from a delivery perspective, it's going to change every day as well. So as you said, it's no longer a 3-year relationship. It's potentially a whole of career relationship with an educational institution or some educational provider. The other one that I think is really meaningful is the quote that we got from Harvard around making sure that it is accessible to everybody and doesn't become the start of some digital divide. So finding a way to ensure that the same level of opportunity is presented to the society and can be captured and can be maximized by all of the individuals at whatever point they are in their career is as important as the tech. The interesting thing about the word cloud was the word cloud, as you always say, we're keen to understand earnings calls, we're keen to understand in your reports what's hot at the moment. These feel to me, the word cloud feels to me to be a 2024, 2023 even set of issues. I think the dial is shifting now where it's what are we actually delivering as a solution and really changing to be sustainable.
Yeah, it is. This is why I was so excited about this one, because it's got so many different levels of what way depends on what problem we're going to chase in the call, depends on how deep we would go, right? One of the things, though, that's going to be really important is when you're thinking about any workforce transformation, whether it's at an industry level, this is a once in a generation change to work. Education is what powers work. And it is fundamental to our society, to the way that we work, to the way that we upskill. And what we're really focused on is organizations, universities, policymakers, everyone needs to be thinking really bold. Because if not, we are going to be left behind. They will be left behind. Businesses won't work. So it is incredibly important for us to really think about having this bold and responsible workforce strategy. And that bold and responsible is one where you're reinventing, you're completely day zero thinking, you're looking at what's possible with the technology that we have and the access to new technologies and ways of thinking. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we are really responsible. We should not be driving towards this world without knowing where we're going and making sure that we take everyone with us. You know, our mission is to create a world with zero waste to potential. And it is incredibly important that we look at the people, the business, and also society. Education has one of the biggest ripple effects that I think that in healthcare, I don't think we can get bigger, you know, in terms of like the touch point to every single person in our families, in our businesses, and also into society. So everyone in this call, like, absolutely, let's be excited and really transformational and bold in our thinking. But at the same time, we're going to help you make sure that you're going to be responsible and not leave anyone behind, and to help you advocate for bold and responsible as a strategy. And whether it's you're on the tech side, you're in the universities, you're in school, or you're a teacher, it's all about bold and responsible. Now, what bold and responsible looks like from a workforce perspective. So the way that we think about it is it's about reinventing your workforce and understanding the work that is being done within your organization. So we need to understand where AI will have the biggest impact. AI does not impact a skill or a job. It impacts a task. And it is incredibly important for everyone to understand the work that is actually being done within a job, the tasks that are done, the skills that are required to complete that task, and then where the AI has the likely, or robotics has the most impact when it comes to those tasks, because that is when we're really going to start thinking about what our future workforce actually looks like and what that impact level will be. Then what you need to do is think about how to move work to the right worker. It won't be long before you start to see, you know, the mobilization of work to worker in the sense of like movement of making sure people have access to meaningful work. But you're also going to see now agents. You're going to see autonomous orchestration of agents operating in work environments, in classroom environments. A teacher will be essentially a manager of a robot soon, where they're kind of having this co-pilot, and they're going to have to learn how to co-pilot and co-create and co-work alongside technology, which I think is so exciting. Like, I think it is just the most exciting part of this whole world. And then the final part is, okay, now that we've thought about, you know, optimization and building this new world, this is where we figure out what will be the impact to our people. What are the jobs that we know we still desperately require? And how do we navigate people on the journey and nudge them towards those paths, and then give them the right learning recommendations to fill the gaps between where they're at today and where they can pivot into. So this is really important in terms of all of the stages of the funnel when it comes to sort of pre-hire to retire, and how the learning will play into the corporate landscape and in the way that we're thinking about the world. Now, one of the things that we kind of talk about, you know, very clearly, and it's something that we're really passionate about, is anything, if you can take away from this session, is jobs have tasks. They don't have skills. They have tasks. AI automates the task needs skills, and people have skills. So when you're first principle thinking about how you solve this problem and how you think about this new world, this should be your little toolkit to help you think about it in your workforce. Because we've all got a little bit lost, including myself, over this period where we're talking about jobs having skills. Jobs do not have skills. They have tasks, which is essentially work that is getting done, which humans require skills to complete. So when you're thinking about this, and as we go through this journey, you'll feel that being pulled as a toolkit all the way through sort of this workshop and this masterclass to start helping us think about how we solve the problem. Now, Mike, really keen to hear a little bit of a deep dive now when it's coming up to actually the industry education ontology that we have. So it would be really awesome for us to start really breaking that down. Before you do that, I just want to give a little bit of context into the sort of work ontology, what it is, how does it look. So here's like a little example where we take basically a job and we can look at the ability for us to break down this project manager job into all of the tasks. We can tell you the skills required to complete those tasks. And then what we're looking at is, well, where is the AI potential of each one of those jobs? How much percentage of that job has actual potential to be automated? Where would the efficiencies be? Where is the task duplication? What's the timeline when we think about when this would actually be valuable? Because you want to start seeing that ROI back. And then what would the likely savings be? So this is the really bold part of like reinvention, where we're looking at, okay, where do we focus our attention? If you're a corporate right now, learning and thinking about this and you're in a company, this should be the first thing that you do, where you start to look at all of my work being done and where is the AI potential, which will then drive the implementation roadmap of your AI strategy.
And the identification of net new tasks as well. So a task that's automated just doesn't disappear. It requires for the individual to now transfer their skills to those tasks that are required to manage this new process. So it's again, it's a whole transformation.
Exactly. And one of the most incredible things, like when we first built the work ontology, the reason that we built out the task data was so that we could understand what was the work being done, so that we could then link skills to really high valuable data. And on the other side of it, that we started to see that when we had the task data, that we started to see lots of other intelligence. So Mike, if you can give us like a little overview of each one of the insights and kind of what that tells us about, the data before we kind of jump in.
Yep, for sure. The AI potential index is really about capturing the how do I describe it? The practicality of the opportunity. So it's trying to understand for an organization what's their current level of process, and then comparing that to how far the process efficiency could be improved through introduction of AI, of automation, of systems, processes, robotics. So that's how much upside there is. But we look to risk balance that based on the maturity of the technology as well. So if it's something that's fresh out of the box, maybe we can't ever get to that point where it's delivering the value that we'd anticipated. So by risk balancing it, what we're trying to do is to indicate, well, these are the biggest upside with the most likelihood of success. The ROI and timeline we measure that as, I think the language we use is time to benefit realization. So it's not necessarily completing payback of the return on investment. It's at what point in time would we anticipate that you would see the benefits that you were expecting? So it's performing the way it needs to. ROI, it means it will have paid for itself and you'll move forward. But at what point in time can you expect your workforce now to be delivering on this new level of benefit? Workforce bloat and task duplication, I think, really recognises this move from traditional siloed jobs and job holders, where you're sitting there, like I said, with my dad, balancing books the same way at the start of your career, at the end of your career, and really being able to capture that and do that all yourself, but not having the means, the technology to share those tasks as a service with others. With workforce bloat and task duplication, and across the ontologies, we get to see where these same tasks with a high level of duplication are formed across different job families or across different roles within the organization, and give you some metric to understand, well, if I bring that together and deliver that as a service, I'm freeing up a resource that might be constrained. In education, I'm a teacher or I'm a lecturer and I've got limited time. If I can free up myself from those administrative services, tasks that other people are also doing, and get that delivered by a service elsewhere, all of a sudden I'm able to deploy my skills where they're most valuable, in the classroom or in the research or in the learning or in the education. So the ability to kind of allow an oversight in an organization about how that impacts and what the future could look like allows them to look at those both from an AI perspective, but also from consolidation, potentially moving them around. And reskilling is, as we said, where we've identified that there's a high value opportunity to pursue. That doesn't mean that somebody just gets all this time back in their day. There's a different task that's an outcome of that. So it's a net new task. We could imagine that it goes from somebody in the classroom delivering education to somebody who's now managing the toolkit that's delivering that education. It's somebody who's managing the experience. So it's a different task to deliver an improved outcome, but there is still work that needs to be done. So I think these are the really powerful four lenses that allow us to, the levers we can pull to balance how an organization wants to take their business forward. There's no right answer in here. Each organization has a balance of these things. But I think they all allow us to make a much more deliberate decision on how we're going to prioritize the investment of effort, investment of time and money in transforming the way we do our work, so that we're not just buying the latest shiny toy. We're making sure that we're investing for maximum sustainability and benefit.
The AI potential index as well, for me, the thing that's really exciting is it's AI, and we look at robotics as well, because I think I'm interested to see the world of robotics playing, in terms of in the education space, whether it's like an active robotics in classroom or, I'm thinking really big here, Mike. I'm like, I'll like drop my kids off to school and they have a Tesla robot teaching them.
Takes them on field trips, takes them on the field trip that they need to see today.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I think that's the thing. And I think AI is a simple label there, but robotics and systems, I think, particularly in education, whether it's vocational, whether it's in retail, getting people used to the shop front, the use of AR and VR, the use of those simulation technologies to bring people in and teach them the experience before they have to deploy it. That's a real change. That's, I think, we'll move further down the chain from delivery to the workforce to delivery in education as well.
Yeah.
On
this one, Mike, just one question on this one. So just to frame my thinking, this is more about education, the companies, like the schools, the universities. Can you just, because there's a kind of blurring line between education when we talk about workforce composition, what is this data based on?
Yep, really good call. So it's traditional education, it's schools, it's vocational techs, colleges, it's universities. It also does touch on some structure of ed tech, but that also we see turning up in the technology space. So when we look at the ed tech workforce, it's primarily driven by the technology side, but there's also a heavy dependence on the research. How do we deliver this? What are we delivering in this? So it's not just ed tech as a platform, it's more another means to deliver education. So the focus here, though, is on those educationalists and the support staff around that. The chart on the left-hand side looks at where we are today. And it's across the whole of the industry. So there are some that are much more advanced. There are others, same with geographies. There are some geographies that have moved a lot further down the path than others. But overall, we still see that the significant majority, in the order of 60%, are at the front line, are delivering education, are delivering learning, whether it's in a school, whether it's research in the university, whether it's within a workforce. They're actually delivering that. So that's still the vast majority of workers here. Administrative support staff probably will reduce a little bit. But the interesting thing when we're looking at the studies is we're seeing that the requirement for education will be increasing as it's a lifelong thing rather than this moment in time within somebody's career, which means that what we anticipate is seeing a similar scale size element of the workforce needing the capability to deliver this new service to a much broader set of learners. So learners both from schools to universities, but across the whole of the workforce through the whole of the career. So we don't see a significant downside in that the size of that element of the workforce, but we do see the need to change so that you're not just delivering in the narrow line that you have historically. You now have to be able to service a much broader range of the market. EdTech and IT support, again, is going to grow, not just in delivery of the technology, but also in the underpinning infrastructure. We know now we're talking about people and people data. We're talking about cybersecurity and privacy. We're talking about all of those things. The three that we kind of wanted to focus on that are at the heart of the education industry, where there is real opportunity today. So this isn't imagining the future with our robots taking kids on field trips. This is on the today elements. It's the administrative and support staff in the education space. And a lot of that leverages some of the opportunity we've seen in other industries as well. It's the IT and EdTech specialists, and then it's those roles that are supporting the specific delivery of education. So they're the three that we'll focus on today. So starting at the start, admin and support staff. So this is the operational side of education, and not too dissimilar to the operational side of most of these large enterprise organizations or industries that we've been looking at so far. It is the ability to identify the required support and administrative tasks that need to get delivered and leverage technology to do it at scale, quicker, more reliably, high level of quality, or in an emerging and changing landscape. So the operational efficiency here is not dissimilar to what we've seen elsewhere. Quite significant, 50 to 60%. It's quite high because it's getting focused across all industries. So a lot of the tools that are needed and would be applied to deliver more value in education are the same that are being delivered elsewhere. So huge market. There is opportunity to focus in on a particular sector, but there's also opportunity to leverage advances everywhere. And the ROI here on admin and support goes directly to the bottom line. So without adjusting the cost, if we're delivering significantly more value to the business, we're able to grow without increasing that cost. It's straight to the bottom line. So significant opportunity to increase margin ROI from a commercial perspective. It does call out here that there's a projected decrease in 10%. that's what came out of our analysis. But in the back of my head, I'm continuing to hear the commentary around the rapid growth of this market, and that it will need to have the infrastructure to sustain that growth. I think the efficiency gains that are needed in this area of the business of the industry will be required to deliver that growth. So while there's some projected decrease, I can also imagine it holding firm on the current workforce size. And again, we're talking about for large enterprises, for large educational infrastructure, we're talking about deployments which integrate with their large systems, their research systems, their education curriculum systems, their ERPs. So these are typically not a straightforward integration because of the scale of touch points within it. We've seen historically that because of the level of integration, these large processes take some time. So it's possible to have a setup early. Often it's a 12-month exercise to do a significant integration.
Oh, sorry, I think I jumped by mistake, but go.
No, okay. I know this is the problem with this one, right? It's so exciting. There's so much. I feel that I'm focusing just on the right now and inside when the opportunity is so much bigger with education. IT and EdTech, again, there's a whole lot of infrastructure changes that are needed to support. So increases the potential to increase performance around cybersecurity, leveraging AI, around the system management, system deployment. But there is also those new platforms that are delivering the education. So bringing on board the educational technology that's going to give the learner the experience that you need. And that is changing using AI and the system management. The platform management is going to be critical.
One of the things I think that is really interesting about the insights that we're showcasing is, one, thinking about it from a business perspective, so the executive, what they care about. Then we're looking at the actions that you can take, so the ROI, the metrics of impact, and then we're looking at like what is the scale of where this will impact. Like a lot of the AI that I hear folks talking about adoption of AI, and they talk about, oh, we should automate this job or we should automate this job. Like some jobs are just not worth automating. Like you want to go to the biggest bang for buck when it comes to area of focus, because we're not going to be able to do everything. So the purpose of this, Mike, and why I love the way you display the data, it kind of brings me on a little bit of a journey in this dashboard, and then it tells you like the time to implement and then the output of what will happen next in terms of these are key skills that are required then from the outset. So when we jump into that then from a faculty support, take us through that one as well.
Yep. Our faculty support is really about improving the delivery. So it's not the front line, it's the toolkits to support that. So it's course management, it's curriculum development, it's grading, it's feedback, it's managing the interaction between the delivery and the learner. And there is a lot of movement in technology here, and there's a lot of opportunity to deliver that experience in a different way. So as the nature of the learner is transitioning from this moment in time learner to a lifelong learner, the processes for doing that improve, the efficiency should improve, but it's also delivering in a different way. So the improvement here we see in the order of 20 to 30% operational efficiency gain. I think there's still a lot of development in this space before we lock in on the new model for what education looks like. I mean, I look backwards and I remember I'm part of the generation where Google was landing at the same time as I was doing degrees. And why was I learning how to remember stuff? And the most efficient way for me to find things is to be able to find it quickly. So I think we're at another moment like that alongside AI. We're looking to have to deliver a different outcome in learning.
Like just time learning. It's the stuff that you do when you're building a company. You kind of just learn as you go. Like I've really adopted to AI because it's like a whole pile of stuff that I've never done before, but I can do it really quickly whenever I'm piloted by knowledge that's fast enough just as I'm doing it, right?
Yeah, and everybody's seeing sorry, there's a couple of points I wanted to make on that last slide just before we jumped on. These ones, what's interesting about this is the time to implement. At the moment, and again, we're talking about now, a lot of these are point solutions. So we lose the complexity of a lot of integrations. Some of these come in uniquely, so they can effectively be deployed and experimented with in an environment to see whether it's meeting the needs of the educational institution or the business. So what some of the big advantages on this side is that these can come in and really be used to trial a new way of working and see whether it delivers on the value. So it can come in reasonably quickly within a controlled environment. So that's the real upside on this one. And when we look at the as you said, jumping to the next slide, as you said, those metrics exist for every role.
Yeah.
So every role has a level of AI potential automation. Every role has a return on a time to benefits realization. Every role has the velocity and the operational efficiency. What we're trying to do is to allow our customers to understand and focus on the highest priority ones. So where do you spend your effort? Where do you spend your time? Where do you invest your business first? And really, if all it does is make sure it's a sense check, are we thinking about the things that are important? Then that's enough. We're getting the business to start to look at where the value sits. When we look at the three that we had, admin staff, because of the maturity of a lot of those platforms, because of the breadth of coverage across a range of industries, typically ends up in the make sure that you're looking here bucket, because there's a lot of opportunity to leverage off lessons in other industries. The other one that stood out here was faculty and support. So there is a real opportunity, because of the transformational nature of the way education can be delivered, to get a real significant AI benefit. And as we said, the timeline is potentially quite small if we're finding the right product that can be delivered without impacting a whole lot of the rest of the infrastructure. So we see that time frame and the potential upside is really what's driving that towards the top of a prioritization list.
The thing as well, Mike, that like for folks on that are dialing in live to this or after the fact when you're watching it on YouTube, like the thing is, this is just a little teeny snapshot, because there's so much data that we have that it's so overwhelming that we're kind of picking a few pieces of data to showcase. But if you're looking for any data to kind of figure out what that means in your context, like on our website, just ping us or DM us, because we can show you kind of what it looks like in the context of some rules that you care about. It's very difficult for us to show everything, and we don't want to overwhelm. So we've talked a lot about the bold side of this, like where you can create operational efficiency, where AI will come into play, where is the place when we're thinking about, the timeline of adoption of AI and the value and the ROI, which is really on that business side, zero waste on business. What we're going to now switch to is really thinking about, well, now we know. So by this time, imagine you're in your world. What you'll have done is you'll looked at all of the data that tells you the AI potential of your workforce. You're going to know the sort of roadmap that you would take and the prioritization. You'll have presented this to your executives or whoever the sponsor is in terms of your organization, whether it's your university, whether it's your workforce. And what's going to happen then is that's going to give you the dial in to understand where the highest impact will be to your people and your current workforce at a job level. And this is where the responsible side comes in. And this is where organizations need to become skill building powerhouses for this new world of work. You now have no excuse to not do this and not leave people behind, because we've got the data that can tell you the direct impacts. So this is where we're really going to focus when it comes into the industry as a whole, and how then, if you're going to be really bold, what that looks like. So Mike, talk us through some of the kind of top pathways. Now, remembering that people have skills, jobs have tasks, and we've now looked at the impacts of the task per job. So we know the level of impact per job. We also are looking at the net new task curation. So skills are required for these new tasks that'll come in because you're adopting AI. So Mike, we'd love to hear sort of what are the pathways to pivot your folks whenever sort of we make any of this really transformational change to the business.
Yep, and what was interesting in education, more than a lot of the other industries that we've looked at, is that the requirement for that involvement is still there. Back to the point that you're making at the very start, the introduction of AI or robotics or systems doesn't remove the need to do something. In most cases, and particularly in these cases, it's a net new task creation. What does the person who's currently delivering the face-to-face experience do going forward to make sure that experience is improved for the learner? So we see reskilling pathways from your traditional frontline educationalists into what is starting to be called, the language is starting to see is around learning experience or experience design. We're seeing those assistants, those support to become much more leveraging the AI toolkit to understand that personalized learning. How do I help this individual get on top of the requirements they need to upskill? And then around the curriculum and content developers, we see them moving much more and it's kind of already in train, moving to delivering content in a new way and understanding how the curriculum needs to change in order to leverage the workforce and the technology that the learners are going to be emerging into. So we've kind of mapped out the top 3 of these probably most exciting, in our analysis, most exciting reskilling pathways. And I think if it's okay, we'll just jump into that first one and maybe look in that in a bit more detail.
You can see that okay?
Yep, it's come through, thank you. So looking at moving the existing cohort of frontline educationalists into a learning experience designer. We see people who've got the skills to take the complex concepts and communicate them to somebody who has to consume them, comprehend them, and then understand how to apply them. So there's the skills that they hold are already in that communications and already in that subject matter expert. So they're delivering a particular element of the curriculum. They're delivering some expertise and some knowledge, but they're bringing that with the ability to communicate it in a way that successfully lands the concepts in the mind of the learner. What we see now is with the technology starting to introduce the delivery of this content directly to the learner, how do we create those learning experiences that are going to most deliver this learning with most value? So either quickest with deepest understanding, with best breadth, with most alignment to the requirements of the future, or the toolkit that's going to allow them to continue to develop. So the ability for the current cohort to pick up these skills around learning experience and instructional design, to understand how to communicate it using the toolkit that's now available across AI content and AI and content creation, is a right now step that allows the current set of workers to pick up those skills that are required to deliver in this right now. So this is a right now thing. This isn't the future. This is the use of AI in delivering learning at the moment. And the ROI for this skills transition, for this career pathway, is significant. It's already the ability to deliver digital means you're delivering to potentially a much larger cohort. So you're already delivering a larger revenue opportunity. The cost of acquiring these new skills then is easily exceeding a 5x payback on the investment for upskilling. So the return on investment for the upskilling is significant. The revenue for the organization is significant. The value increase for the individual in being able to deliver this experience with a higher value outcome is significant. So everything down here is really strong for starting to take our education workforce and moving them towards alignment with AI as partnership or technology as partnership in delivering the learning. There's a lot of courses available on course providers or through university to help us understand these new elements. It's definitely still developing, but what we see here is that this is a part that we are seeing.
Yeah, I think as well, I think it was like Sanjay in the chat was saying it's the visibility and transparency around it as well. So like our take is there is no excuse. Like no one can say in a couple of years we didn't know. Yes, you do. Here's the data. Like here is the data. How do you then take action as a workforce to transition everyone, and the transparency that we're going to give to the employees? What we've got to figure out as a Reejig business is like, we've got all this data. Do we tell the individuals? So we started testing on socials around being really transparent around what we can see, because we're trying to figure out how do we let people know without creating this like fear of like, you know what I mean? Like going to doom and gloom. So it's kind of like, how do you prime an individual and navigate them forward? So I think this is one of the things that we're going to have to figure out as a company, as a society. But this data, Mike, is super helpful when it comes to understanding, you know, what is the actual impact to my workforce today? Where are we going in terms of the next stage of our workforce? What is the new task that'll be created, which will lead to essentially newer jobs or evolved jobs? I personally think it's more about job evolution rather than new created jobs. Like a lot of people talk about, oh, we got all these new jobs for the future and now we're going to drive all our budget towards spending. Based on what? Like, because the new job creation will only happen if you impact the current state. So I think you have to understand, what is the current state of my workforce? Where are we going and what will the impact be? What does that evolve into? So your workforce evolution becomes this kind of secondary phase. And what are the new skills that are required to complete those new tasks? Or what is the learning that'll need to be done if we impact, you know, a major part of someone's job and they have to pivot, what does the reskill look like? That's the way that I would think about this in the most basic sort of way of describing it, because we're kind of overcomplicating this whole thing. And all of the reports that you read, like it's so overwhelming for folks to understand what the future looks like. But if there's one thing that you can take away from this call and from this session is like, you know, the people have the skills, the jobs have tasks, AI automates tasks. Start there. Understand what is the work that my business is doing? What are the tasks? Where is the highest place that my business will likely automate AI and bring in AI? That becomes your reskilling strategy. That should be where all of your dollars are going into the business when it comes to actually reskilling your people. And I mean, the broader topic around AI as a whole, when it comes to education and classrooms and navigating our kids, like I am passionate and personally driven to find a way to do that. My two little babies, I've got a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old, and you know, what are they going to do? And the teachers don't know what the jobs are for the future. No one knows. The AI companies don't even know. So like, how do we figure out what that looks like so that our education curriculum is being designed on the right learning? Whether you're teaching kindergarten or you're a university MBA teacher, I started doing my MBA and I was learning more while doing a startup than I was in a university course, right? And I think this is where learning is going to completely change. And then from a vendor's perspective, like if you're a vendor right now, oof, like on the learning side, the way that you're going to see these like co-pilot digital trainers that are going to be hand in hand with you and walking you through a whole real life learning experience, where it's like my example of me building a startup, it was way more valuable to me than the actual MBA course. That's where it becomes really sort of interesting to see where we're going to do. But as a key kind of focus on the reinvention first, then look at about the movement of work, and then think about sort of the reskilling and the learning experiences that are going to come into play. Now, I've been getting questions, and I've been trying to field on my WhatsApp and on my LinkedIn DMs as well some questions. I've got a couple that came through, Mike, as well. To the teachers who are terrified of ChatGPT and don't know if it'll benefit their students, what do you say to them?
To the teachers, so the reality is it's not going away, and the reality is that both sides of the classroom are probably as familiar as possible. So this is what I mean about the frontline education can only deal with the curriculum that they got, and the curriculum needs to be focused on what the learners need to be successful. Everyone in that classroom needs to be successful alongside AI. Yeah. So I think I've seen a number of instances with teachers who are trialing approaches to recognise that ChatGPT is going to be used in doing homework, in writing essays. Yeah. How do they measure the success of that? So it's finding a way and recognising that everybody's learning together. It's finding a way, I think, to support the whole classroom to adopt the technology, not punish it, not penalise it, and not pretend it doesn't exist. So I think it's okay to be terrified, because that means that there's something worth paying attention to. But I think paying attention to it means it's what's the thing that you're going to run towards, because that's where the value is. And if you can run towards this, you recognise that everybody in your classroom is going to run towards it. If we can make it not so that it's something doing my homework for me, but it is now part of how I work, that's where I think the whole industry is moving towards.
I know so many teachers that spend their Sunday doing homework marking. Like, if you want your Sundays back, there's a couple of areas that I would highly recommend. If you're a teacher and you want some time back, there is some quick wins that you can do to prepare for your classwork, to do all of the sort of laborious things that you're spending your weekends doing because you don't have time while you're in the classroom. This is kind of the moment to free you up to focus on the craft that is teaching and loving our children and educating them and bringing that energy and influence to their lives as well.
Yeah. So one of the things I think talks about what's wrong in this is that there is a whole set of technology that's written to help people get homework done without having to do anything. So write my essays for me. There is a whole set of technology now, AI, that's being written to work out, was AI used to write this homework? So there's AI versus AI on both sides. That's a bit of an arms war. I think where we need to get to is that it's not going away, and that it's that getting AI to help me with my homework, if I look, I want AI to help me be efficient and deliver successfully in my work. This is a skill that we need. So how can we be teaching that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was another question that came in on the chat, which was about like our workforce as a Reejig business. I mean, look, my background is workforce optimization. I fell down a massive rabbit hole when it came to AI. I personally believe that AI will become like genuinely a worker that's in the organization. It's just trying to figure out how that orchestrates and how that plays within the environment. But, you know, we deployed and looked at our work ontology. We understood the best place. We find that we saved over 1.6 million a month. We're making more money than we've ever made. We are closing deals faster. Our margins are up, I think, 29 points in terms of like our profit level. We are just at the point of break even, which we've chosen not to do because we're going to expand even more globally. But like that is an incredible amount for a company of our size. Now, if you imagine what's possible when it comes to every normal organization that's over 1,000 people, millions of dollars of opportunity. And here's the beautiful part about what we've done is it wasn't that we were just cutting costs for the sakes of cutting costs. What we wanted to do was cut out all of the sort of crappier parts of the work, save money, reallocate that budget. So now we can hire people like Jacinta Newman, who's, you know, head of talent, KPMG. We've hired Nuno Gonzalez, who's, you know, SVP of learning, Nike, Mars. You know, we are now able to kind of pivot our budget and spend. Imagine what's possible if you did that in the education space, where you could reallocate funding to folks in rural communities, in areas that really need it. Think about, you know, globally, sort of some of the most underprivileged countries like Africa in terms of access to education and meaningful work. Like, I mean, I'm going to go off on a rant here on this one because it's like, it's like literally I'm building Reejig to do this other thing because I want to do that in the future, right? Which is like, how do we do this at scale? And I think this is the building blocks for us. So whoever poked the bear by asking me that question, that's like, we looked at it from Reejig and then we started to think about this at scale. And I just think everyone needs to look at this and start thinking about this. There was another question as well. How do you think cutting the budget of the Department of Education in 2025 will affect the areas of EdTech? I mean, I'm going to take this one because I think about it more as an optimization. Whoever asked that question, I would just say if I was to be put into the Department of Education and to run a work ontology and to be able to understand where the money is actually being spent, where are your people spending, I would bet you my business that there is a massive amount of task duplication that's happening. There is probably about 40% of the tasks that are being done within the Department of Education that could be enhanced or completely removed with AI, which would free up all of the money that we would be short in terms of the budget cuts. And I think now is the time where the Department of Education needs to step up. Like they actually need to be a leader in this space and not kind of get left behind because they're going to get forced to be disrupted. They should be disrupting themselves from within and getting to this and really starting to reinvent themselves, because what's going to happen is it'll end up happening to them. And this is what you don't want to have. So, you know, whoever that is, you can DM me and I would happily come in and do a masterclass for you and identify a whole pile of areas that your leaders should really start focusing on. And I'll do that for free, just out of pure, like a gift of knowledge. One more question as well. Is anyone in the education industry leading the way? I mean, I would say as an education industry, like from a schooling and universities, I think really honestly, I think the universities had this beautiful moment to really own this space for becoming more than a university and then bringing that into the workplace where they could start taking out their, you know, full-time degrees and, you know, really driving that down into units and on-demand learning into corporates. I think there is a massive opportunity there that they're wasting. But I think even if they built that, that's going to get disrupted. We're working with incredible folks in Africa who are really focused on reskilling all of Africa. So think of like going live with 1 million users overnight, where their focus is more on how do we take folks who don't have access to meaningful work to skill them into the jobs that we know we need in the future, to provide them with, you know, cost-effective learning moments to enable them to be reskilled at scale and then helping them access meaningful work. You know, there's companies like MTN globally who are leading the way on this space. They are not a traditional education provider, but what they're doing is they're using the power of the fact that they're the biggest organization in Africa to really drive this new way of thinking, and it's incredible what they're doing. And we've just we've just sort of been running through that project, and they started in Nigeria as their focus. So folks like that are doing incredible things. I do think that the learning providers are going to be completely disrupted, because I'm seeing a lot of incredible tools in the market now that are doing that kind of just on time learning, co-piloting you while learning, and they are incredible. They're so cool. They are the way that someone like me would love to learn, and they are what I believe will happen in the education system at schools as well, where you're kind of working through a complex topic with a co-pilot that's kind of guiding you through that process. So yeah, so I mean, Mike, I don't know if you've seen anything other than that that's leading the way. I personally think this is the one that needs a big kick up the ass to get us really moving now, without being rude.
Yeah, no, as I think we said at the start, that we don't know what the answer is. So what are we trying to teach learners so that they'll be successful in the future? So I think there's a curriculum, there's delivery, there's lifelong learning, there's some big issues here. Like you said, there's a number of people who are trying. So there's a lot of, I know universities like, I think Monash and La Trobe in Australia are working really hard on micro credentials that are valuable today. You can transform your career with a credential from a university that's consumable rather than an investment of years. So I think trying to work out the path is as important at this moment in time and as the outcome.
Yeah. For anyone that wants to kind of have a masterclass for your organization, like feel free to do this, and myself or Nuno or Jacinta can host like a free jamming session quite like this to kind of really start that sort of innovation day zero thinking to help you kind of navigate your folks through this journey. And join us next week. So our next time we're focused on the hospitality industry. This will be a really exciting topic that we're really looking forward to seeing you there. For those of you in the North America region, happy Thanksgiving. I hope you have the most incredible time. Thank you for your gift of time to us today, where we get to do one of the things that we're so passionate about, which is, saying it as it is and just jamming with data. And we will see you all later. Thank you, folks.
Thanks all.